So welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another video on our series of information security. And today is the lecture 2, and in this lecture we'll be understanding the information security fundamentals. Before moving to this information security fundamentals, we would be revising what we have learned in our lecture 1, and I'll be giving you a few scenarios. On the basis of that scenario, you will be given the answer. So this is the scenario 1. We have learned about asset risks and vulnerabilities, threats in our lecture 1. So let's see. So a company's customer database is accessible through a web application. During the security assessment, it's found that the web application has an SQL injection vulnerability. So what can be the asset in this scenario? So you may pause it and you may check it. What are the assets, risks, vulnerabilities, and threats? So as per my understanding, the asset would be the company's customer's database. So database is basically the asset which should be safe, and there should be no vulnerabilities through which an attacker gets into the database and get hold of that database. So the database is the most important thing, which is basically asset. What is the risk? Is access risk can be, I believe, risk is that their database can be compromised, that can be accessed can be using this vulnerability of SQL injection. So what is at risk? All asset is always at risk. This database is basically the loss of this database or unavailability of this database is the risk. Third is the vulnerability. What is that weakness or loophole in this complete scenario? So there is an SQL injection vulnerability in the web application. So SQL injection vulnerability means so there is some sort of weakness related to this SQL injection. I have a complete video which is given in the description. You may check it out. What is SQL injection? But for now, this is basically a vulnerability, a weakness in the system through which an attacker gets into the system and it can exploit the system. So number 4, what is the threat? So what is the threat? Threat is that attacker who is going to get into the system through this vulnerability of SQL injection and get hold of the asset, which is basically the database. So coming over to the scenario 2, an employer receives an email that appears to be from the company's IT department asking them to reset their password via a provided link. The email looks suspicious. So what is the asset, risk, vulnerability, and threat? You may pause it and check. So I believe what is the asset? So asset is a company receives an email that appears to be company's IT department. So when the attacker is going to click on that link, so it feels that it's some sort of phishing link or phishing attack. So when he will click on that link, its system is going to be compromised. So once the system is going to be compromised, so the employee's data basically is at risk, which is basically employee's data or the system is the asset. So what is the thing which is on risk is always the asset. And here what is the risk? So risk is that his that computer or the system of that employee it will be compromised. So this is the risk. And what is the vulnerability? Vulnerability is the willingness of that employee to click on that provided link. So this is the vulnerability. And the threat is that, what is the threat? Threat is that particular individual who have sent that phishing link. So coming over to the scenario 3, a hospital uses outdated medical devices connected to its network. These devices have not received security patches in several years. So what is asset, risk, vulnerability, threat? You may pause it. So what can be the asset between outdated medical devices or network? So I believe asset is basically the network, which is most important thing, which can be at risk. And what is the risk? Risk is that network can be can be compromised because it has not received several security patches in several years, so that network is at risk. What is the vulnerability? Vulnerability is the outdated medical devices. So outdated medical devices might have some sort of vulnerability in itself, and when it is connected to the network, so obviously it is going to malign all the other devices which are connected to that network. And what is the threat? Threat is that obviously all the devices which are on that network are going to be compromised also. That is the risk, and threat is basically this outdated medical devices. So let's move to the lecture 2, which is information security fundamentals. So in this lecture we'll be learning the this confidentiality, integrity and availability traits, data states, hackers and hacker classes, why security is difficult, and standards and regulations which are to be followed by different organizations. So coming over to CIA trait, what is confidentiality? Confidentiality is basically preventing unauthorized access to information and disclosure. So as we've already learned in lecture 1 that once if you have a password, obviously you would not like it to be known to others, that other people should know your password. So basically you want your password to be confidential. So so the hacker's intention is always to get hold of your password and destroy your confidentiality. So confidentiality is normally achieved through cryptography. What is cryptography? Cryptography is basically you may consider this example. If I have a password of ABC, so in cryptography what I'll do, I'll keep A as 1, B as 2 and C as 3 and F as 6. So my password would be 1, 2, 3 and F. So now hacker, if at all hacker get hold of my password which is in the form of numbers, but in actual my password is ABCF, but hacker is getting hold of 1, 2, 3 and F. So now hacker has to redefine my password to get hold of the original password. So this is how the confidentiality is basically we save our passwords and we save our confidentiality. And number second thing is integrity. Integrity basically, if at all attacker get hold of your data, and if attacker basically changes that data and the data is not in its original form, so this is basically the disruption of this integrity. So how we basically maintain and safeguard our integrity? We do it by hashing. What is hashing? So hashing is basically, if you have a password so there is a certain hash of each password which is created. So what is hash? Hash is like a 17-18 figure code. So if you change your password, so the hash is changed. For example, if I have sent an email, for that matter, if I have sent 3 to 4 words to another person, which is like I am a boy, so there is a certain hash, certain code which can be numbers, letters, special characters. It is created with respect to that particular line which I have written. So so if an attacker get hold of that sentence which I want to keep secret, and if he changes, and if we basically change it into I'm a girl, so that hash will automatically change. So if at all someone wants to check whether the sentence is right or wrong, whether there is some attacker who have changed it or not, so he basically, what he can do is he can compare the hashes. So if there is a difference between hashes, obviously he'll understand that whether integrity is intact or not. So finally, what is availability? Availability is that if an attacker gets hold of your system and he basically locks your system and tells you to give money, and then he'll give you the password. So this is your availability is compromised. So in order to there's always one solution of availability, which is to always make backups and do redundancy. What is redundancy? It's basically a second way of achieving your goals. A second way of achieving your goal, like making a backup. And if at all your main system is hacked and your availability is compromised, you can get hold of your data through maybe your data is in cloud. You can access the cloud, or maybe it's in hard disk. So you can get hold of your data through that means. So there are a few scenarios, and this will give you a better understanding of these. So number one is an employee accidentally sends a spreadsheet containing an employee's salary to an external email address. So which component of CIA trade is compromised? You may pause it. So I believe there is a problem of confidentiality in it. So employees the salaries is a confidential thing, and they have accidentally sent it to an external email address, so the confidentiality is at risk. Number two is hacker modifies the financial records in the company's database, causing disruption in the financial report. You may pause it. So I believe it's a matter of integrity, because hacker is getting hold of firstly the financial records, and secondly he is modifying the financial records. So once the hacker basically modifies your data and send it, then it is the problem of integrity. Number three, denial of service attack overwhelms the company's web server, making their online service unavailable to customer. So what is the compromised trade? So I believe it is availability, because due to this denial of service attack, the data is not available to the customer. So what is denial of service attack? So there is a video in the description. You may get better understanding, and you can watch that video as well. So then there are a few key components in information security: authentication, access control, authorization, and non-repudiation. What is authentication? So authentication basically ensures that a communicating entity is the one it claims to be. So for example, let's understand it in the form of story. So basically you are going into your department in university, and there is a biometric system in place at the door. So basically you have that biometric card with yourself. So you put your biometric card on the door. Now the system will basically check whether you are what you claim to be, whether this car has the certain sort of permissions and permissions to unlock the door. So this completes process of permissions and authentication. This complete process is basically access control, so that whether in few the card have permissions to enter in certain doors, and it will not unlock the certain doors. So this complete process comes into the access control, and the process in which basically that biometric device is checking whether you are exactly the person or not. So it is known as authorization, and once it is checked, it will check and it will give you permission to go ahead, and it will unlock the door. So that is basically authorization. That is authorization, that you have now permission to enter into this building. So this is authorization basically. What is non-repudiation? Non-repudiation is basically it provides the protection against the denial by one of the entity involved in communication of having participated in all part of the communication. You must have seen in WhatsApp whether when you send a message to one of your loved one, and there is a double tick in it, and once there's a double tick in the color in a blue color, so it will tell you that your communicating partner have read your message. So now no one can deny whether you have read or not. So this is basically example of non-repudiation, that no one can deny whether the communication happened or not. So there's a few scenarios just to give you better understanding of these concepts. One is an employee tries to access the company's financial record system. So what is basically in these key concepts, what is basically represented in this scenario? An employee that is trying to access the company's financial records. So he is basically, just to have that biometric example in your mind, he is basically trying to access certain building or certain financial records. So basically system is in the process of verifying whether the person is exactly the same person or not. It is basically authentication. It is authentication. So once the user logs into the corporate emails account, or he is given the access of this financial record, or in scenario 2 it is given the access of a corporate email account. So he is now, this process is basically authorization. He is given the permission to get into the system. So in scenario 3, a client digitally signs a contract with the company using an online signing service. So now what it can be. So a client digitally signs a contract. So a client is basically signing a digital contract. So he cannot basically tells after 5-10 minutes that I have not signed it, because he have digital impressions and digital signatures available. So it is a matter of non-repudiation, I believe. Now moving on to the next scenario, which is John, a software developer, and Sarah, a finance manager, works at the same company. John swipes his card at the main entrance and gains access to the office building. John then tries to access the server room. Since he is a software developer, his ID card has the necessary permissions, and the door to the server room unlocks. Later, John tries to access the financial department. Since he does not have the required permission, the door remains locked and he is denied access. So here you can see a single person in certain places he is given access, and in certain he is not given an access. So there is a system in place at the back end which is basically working, and which is going through the process of authentication and authorization. So this is an example of access control. So now moving ahead, what is CIA threat? So in an example, we can understand that the two-factor authentication, a debit card with a PIN code, provides confidentiality before authorizing access to the sensitive data. So what is the two-factor authentication in your, for example, if you log into your Facebook account, so it gives you it gives you a code on your cell phone, and if you enter that code, then only then you'll be given the permission to log into your system. So this is basically a strict control over the confidentiality, that no Tom, Dick or Harry gets into your account. Number two, the ATM and the bank software ensures data integrity by maintaining all transfer and withdrawal records. So you must have taken out your mini statements or your bank statements at any point in time in your life. So that statements basically tells you at what time in life you have withdrawn how much of the money. So it is basically it is maintaining the data integrity. So at last, the ATM provides availability as it is public and users and is accessible all the time. So it's a matter of availability, and sometimes ATMs are not working, and it's basically it is compromisation of the availability. So moving ahead, so there's an example of this confidentiality is that a client is basically telling his boss that our company is going to make 10% of loss in 24 hours maybe. So there's a hacker in between, and he have listened this, and he is connected to the same network. So once hacker have listened it, so now what hacker will do? So what if he tells the same information to the media? So it might have effects on the reputation of the company. So this is the effect of confidentiality. Number two, integrity. If the hacker basically changes that data and convert it to 0% loss, so obviously this is going to be havoc for the company, that miscommunication is happening. So that's why integrity is necessary. So what if availability is compromised? So hacker basically disconnect both the client and the boss. So what then? So obviously it's a problem. So now moving ahead, what is the security attack? So there are five types of attacks. Number one is normal flow, and that information source and information destination. For example, an employee is sending a message to his boss, and it is going the way it should go. It is a normal flow. And then in B, it is interruption. Basically, hackers come in between the communication, and it stops the data, and basically data is not going to the boss. So it is interruption. It is the compromisation of the availability. And number three, what is interception? So basically data is simply going to the boss, but a hacker is basically understanding, and he is just watching what the data is and where it is going. So he is not basically not disturbing the availability, neither changing the data. He is just watching the data. So this is the problem of confidentiality. So then moving to part D, which is modification. So data is firstly coming to the hacker, then from hacker it is going to the modified data is going to the boss. So this is the matter of integrity. Modification is the matter of integrity. Then at last, what is fabrication? So basically employee is not sending any data. The hacker himself is basically creating data and providing data to the boss. So maybe some fake data or data for its own goals and benefits. So this is known as fabrication. So moving ahead, what are the data states? So there are three major states in data. One is at rest, in transit, and in use. So we have different sort of security for all three states of data. Then hackers and hacker classes. There are 6-7 classes and types of hackers. One is black hat hacker. He is basically he's a smart chap who used to do bad work. Number two is the white hat hackers, who are good people and they have the skills and they try to protect the companies and people from the black hat hackers. Number three is gray hat, so they can sometimes they use the offensive approach and sometimes they use the defensive approach. And there are suicide hackers who are basically they have certain cause in their mind and they don't have any fear of any punishment. So they basically, their task is to just complete it by hook and crook. Number five is script kiddies. Script kiddies are basically you guys who have little knowledge of cybersecurity and hacking, and they start playing and start running the scripts and tools and software developed by the real hackers. Then there are state-sponsored hackers. State or agencies always have a certain sort of, they always hire the hackers for their own goals. Then there are a few hacktivists, normally political parties provide, they hire few hackers for a certain goal, or to disable certain websites of their rivalries, for their rivalries and stuff like that. So moving ahead, what is the hacking mindset? Hopefully you will learn to think like a criminal mastermind but behave like a gentleman. You must have heard about the Kevin Mitnick. If not, then you must have heard about the Mitnick Security Consulting. So it is basically, who was this Kevin? Kevin was one of the most wanted hacker. So he had so many charges on him, and he was the most wanted person. Although later on there were few films were made on him, and what I basically want to convey over here is that your mind should understand that how bad people would be thinking. So back in mind, you should think like the criminal, but in actual you should behave like a good person. So Gary McKinnon have the same story. This Albert Gonzalez, so you can learn about him as well if you want to. Why security is difficult? So this is a very important question, that why security is difficult. So in the development and in the IT industry, there are three things which are always which are always in discussion. This is known as security triangle. Number one is functionality. Number two is usability. Number three is security, and this is the ball. So moving the ball towards security means less functionality and usability. And once wheresoever ball goes, other two things will be compromised. So more security means like iPhone. You must have seen that iPhone users cannot download third-party applications. They do not have this hand-free opportunity. They have so many restrictions. So obviously they are keeping their security as a priority, obviously, and usability is not a priority. So in Android, the usability is priority and security is not the priority. So this is how it works. And secondly, the security is an afterthought, always an afterthought. Fundamentally, security is difficult. Bad security solution further impede progresses, and the problem is people, not the computers. People normally click on the links and they have less knowledge about the security. So there are a few misconceptions. One is, what is the difference between secure system and the correct system? Correct system is the system which basically fulfilling your need. If you want to edit some photo and you download a software for that, so software is basically providing you all the functionalities to edit that photo, but software has so many vulnerabilities in itself. So this software can be correct software for editing the photos, but it cannot be a secure software. So same goes for the systems. So then there is a likelihood of existence of a flaw versus likelihood of a flaw being exploited by a penetrator. So there can be a vulnerability available in a system, but it is not always necessary that this vulnerability is exploitable by the penetrator or the attacker. Secondly, this security is an afterthought. You can just read it. It's not very important. Then there are misconceptions about the data encryption. So number one thing in your mind should be that nothing is secure. Even if you can just You say that I have this PCI compliance, I have padlock symbols, I have two-factor authentication, I have encrypted data, so nothing is secure. This does not give you absolute safety, full security, or guaranteed data safety. So your system is always at risk. You have to be very cautious. Then the problem is people, not the computer. So this is the 25 most common password by the year according to the splash data. You can see how bad our passwords are always. So there are this insider attacks, lack of security awareness, lack of authorization controls, and these are the password. You can see the standard of the passwords. Even anyone can guess it in first 3 tries. So the problem is always people, not the computers. And then coming over to the standards and the regulations. So what is PCI DSS? So PCI DSS, here there are a few standards, and these standards you just need to know that which industry this standard is targeting. No need to go in nitty-gritties for now. So PCI DSS is basically payment card industry data security standards. So all these debit cards and credit cards come into this industry, and they have made certain laws that all the organizations which are managing these credit cards and banks, they should have the PCI DSS compliance with them. So there must be certain rules they have to follow. Obviously, if a company, for that matter, Escrow Bank is managing my debit card, so they have all my data. So obviously, if they are compliant with the PCI DSS, so there is a certain rules defined by this compliance that this data should be safe, and you should adopt this policy to save that data. So this is how it works. Then there is ISO 27001. So this specifies the requirement of establishing, implementing, and maintaining and improving an information security management system. It can go for any organization. They should have compliance with the ISO 27001. So there are certain rules in it. It goes similar to the PCI DSS, but this standard basically targets the organizations, not specifically this card or payment card industry. Then HIPAA is basically these hospitals or this health related facilities have to have compliance with this HIPAA, which is Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So obviously they have so much data with them. They have their clients or their patients records and data, and they have to be in compliance with the HIPAA. Then there is DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So it defines the legal prohibitions against the circumvention of the technological protection measures employed by the copyright owners to protect their work, and against the removal of alteration of copyright management information. Then there is this GDPR, which is a general data protection regulation. So obviously no one can hack anyone's data, so everyone have to be in compliance with GDPR. No organization can hire an online information security engineer for their pen testing, so this can come into GDPR. So there are rules like this. So moving on to this cyber crimes and their punishment. Nowadays in Pakistan, cyber terrorism, it can go for 14 years of imprisonment and 50 million fine, or both. You can just have a read and be very careful which sort of hacker you want to become, black hat hacker or white or grey. So in next lecture we will be understanding the introduction to cryptography, which will be lecture 3, and these are the points we will be covering in that. One is cryptology, types of cryptography, symmetric encryption and asymmetric, then hashing, and steganography. Thank you. Stay tuned. Do like and comment and subscribe. Thank you.